Hi, this is Joanne Hillhouse in Antigua. Thanks for joining my live stream with Danielle Boodoo-Fortune. Um, Danielle is in Trinidad. Danielle and I have worked together on a few projects, and we're going to chat about those projects today. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions later in the chat, but we're going to kick it off by introducing each other. Happy World Book Day, by the way. World Book and Copyright Day. Happy World Book and Copyright Day, Danielle.
Happy World Book and Copyright Day. It's an important day.
It really is. So we decided that you would introduce me and I would introduce you. So as you are my guest, why don't you start?
So I met Joanne at BIM Arts for the 21st Century Caribbean Women Writers Symposium in 2009. And I always remember Esther Phillips saying that once you meet Joanne once, you know that she's an amazing writer. And I can't introduce her without saying that first. So Joanne C. Hillhouse is an Antiguan writer, poet, blogger, and cultural advocate, among many, many other roles. She has published many books. So this is probably even more than this now. 7 published books, 2 adult novels, 2 teen young adult novels, 3 children's picture books. Several of her poems, short fiction, non-fiction, and other writing have been published in Caribbean and international anthologies and journals. She freelances as a writer, editor, writing coach, and of course, workshop facilitator. Her lit arts development programs include the J. Hadley Summer Youth Writing Project and the nonprofit Wadadley Youth Pen Prize. And Joanne does so many things, I can't even keep track of them all.
Well, I'm just trying to keep up with you because you are the multi-talented Danielle Boodoo-Fortune. And again, I remember meeting you at the BIM conference celebrating Caribbean women writers. I remember you were the youngest one there on the panel, and I would probably have been the second youngest. And I just remember falling in love with your words, and that hasn't changed. I think it's unfair that you are both a talented visual artist and a talented poet. I mean, one person shouldn't have so many gifts, but I think that we are blessed to have the gifts that you give to us. I enjoy your words. You also an award-winning poet, an award-winning writer, in the sense that you have won the poetry award from the Bocas in the Bocas Prize, which is a major deal for those songs. You have illustrated many a book, many a cover, and at the same time managed to be a full-time mom, wife. I don't know how you do it. And so my first question to you is actually going to be about, because you have 2 boys, Raphael and Dante, and you illustrated a book for me called The Jungle Outside, which is published by HarperCollins, and the main character's name is Dante. Was that at all weird for you? That's my first question.
So I remember when I got that first email from HarperCollins, and I think at the time I had not too long ago given birth, maybe a couple of months, and it felt like such perfect, synchronicity that the character's name was Dante and my baby's name was Dante, and so I think that made the book even more special for me because it just, what are the chances of that? So it was even that much more special to make the Dante of the jungle outside his own person in his own right too, but it was just so very special. And just one of the really cool things about art that it does that sometimes. But it was not weird at all.
And since I'm not able to pull it up just now, this is the book that we're talking about, The Jungle Outside. I will pull up the image in a bit, but I wanted to keep it moving. Danielle, you have a question for me?
I do. As we are talking about The Jungle Outside and illustrations, do you have the illustrations in mind when you're writing, or does it come afterwards, or is it hard to kind of see have the visual image in mind of what you want the characters to look like, or the setting, or the cover, or anything like that. Because as a writer and an illustrator, it's hard for me to picture, balancing the both aspects of it in your mind.
Well, it was different. We worked on two books together: Lost, Caribbean Sea Adventure with Caribbean Reads Publishing, and The Jungle Outside with HarperCollins. And the experience was different from one book to the next. With Lost, I was definitely thinking of images, if not with the first draft, because the first draft, hopefully you're kind of in the zone and you're kind of making it sort of unravel and just focusing on the world of the story. But I know very early on, I was thinking of, like, for instance, in Lost, the main character is an Arctic seal named, in the book, he's named Dolphin, but in real life, it's based on an Arctic seal named Wadadley. And so I pulled up images of Wadadley, and I was pulling up a lot of reference images for the undersea world, what a jellyfish looks like, what a community of jellyfish look like together. And it actually helped me to describe them better when I could have an idea of what they would look like all together. Especially, I remember the jellyfish scene in particular, when I saw the pink loops and so on, I was able to capture that in words. With The Jungle Outside, the publisher actually asked for suggestions, re-images for each panel. And so I just made, like, okay, this sort of a written description of the images, as opposed to specifically the character looks like this, the character looks like that, the world looks like this. So I think it varies depending on the book. It certainly did for me. I didn't start out as a children's book writer. It happens that I've written 3 of them to date, but I really am a writer, someone who grapples with words, my current stumbling notwithstanding. But I live in the world of words, and so the images are not natural to me, but I find with children's picture books, it can help. And it did with Lost, and with The Jungle Outside, it was kind of interesting to put down suggestions and to see those images come back to me as not exactly what I had pictured, but even better because you're the visual one. Okay, so my next question for you is, well, it goes back to what I said initially. How are you so good at so many things? And do you have to switch different parts of your brain to access the mom side, to access the wife, to access the person just trying to navigate the world, to try access the artist trying to navigate a creative space, to access the writer, the poet, because your poetry is so sublime. It's like somebody's that good of a poet that almost should be all that they do. But then your poetry, when I read your poetry and I see your visuals, I realize that you're also a very visual poet, and you're also the qualities that I see in your poetry are reflected in your visuals as well. So perhaps those intersect in a way in your brain that, So how are you so good at all these things, and how do they intersect for you?
They do intersect, but they kind of, in terms of the creative process, they happen on very different kind of wavelengths. And it has not really been possible for me to write and paint at the same time, to be actively painting and working on writing in any kind of sustained way at the same time. And especially since I have 2 little boys, and they're very, very, very energetic. And so the kind of mental and I suppose for want of a better word, spiritual place I need to be in to write, it has become harder. It has become increasingly harder to kind of find that space that I was able to get into when I wrote those songs. So the writing, I have to physically carve out space for myself, time in the day, and to create that space to make it happen. But the art flows more freely. It's more physical. It's more about my hands and actually the flow of it. So it's very much, the same kind of images, the same roots, but they flow in very different ways. So I just kind of, we're in a space now where we just do what we can. So
Oh
I
yeah.
do what I can when I can, and I really try not to worry about it too much and to kind of hold on to the writing will come and there is a season for everything.
Yes, and we are definitely, I mean, I don't know what the last year has been like for you, but um, it's actually been a sort of chaotic whirlwind for me in terms of the ups and downs of it. I guess in a way I thought I would be more creative than I have been, and I've had to give myself the grace to allow, um, and not always, I don't always give myself the grace. Sometimes I'm very hard on myself, but just to allow that it's either it's coming or it's not coming. Sometimes you have to pressure yourself, but we're all going through a unprecedented season, and it's okay to not be at optimum creative level, as you see, because sometimes when you look at social media, it feels like everybody is accessing everything and everybody's
Creating non-stop. Yes.
so it can feel a little bit daunting, but yeah. Did you have another question for me? Did you ask me two questions?
Yeah, I had another question, and it kind of flows from what we were just talking about. You are such a prolific writer. It feels, for me, it feels like you are one of those people who just, project after project, and I'm like, I don't know how she does that. It looks, at least from the outside, like just constant, like really quality output. So, where do you come up with your ideas? Do they flow, or is it something like you have to consciously sit down and feel like very goal oriented? Because I am curious. I
Okay,
personally would love to.
just allow me a minute to bask in the glow that a writer whose work I very much admire just called my output quality output. So it's not enough to be prolific, but to try to be good, to try to put something substantive into the world and something meaningful to you and hopefully meaningful to others. As I said, I have been struggling to create this past year, but it hasn't meant that I haven't been writing. Obviously, I blog, and I have my column, Creative Space, and I freelance as a writer and an editor and all of that. So I'm always there's things always happening, but in terms of my own creative output, that definitely has not been happening at the level that I am happy with. I am working on several things, not at once, all the time, but trying to, push them out. And the birthing process has been long and laborious. But I think in terms of my output, I started out as a journalist. And as a journalist, you're juggling several stories, at least in our marketplace where you don't necessarily always have a single beat. You're juggling several things and you have deadlines and deadlines and deadlines. So I've always learned to write to deadline. So that is not problematic. If I have a deadline, I would push myself towards it. Um, but with the creative stuff, as I said, it hasn't been happening as readily right now, but the column is always on time because that's a deadline, So I think I'm in a space of having to recalibrate how I do things, and as I said, have some more grace with myself. But it's interesting that you say I'm prolific. I don't feel very prolific, but it's always interesting how people see you from the outside as compared to how you see yourself. And I'm not as interested in being prolific as I am as interested in being someone who's putting out something meaningful, which is why when you said quality, that meant something to me. Okay, so we're going to move on. I'm actually having some difficulty pulling up the images, but I'm going to keep trying as we talk because I don't want to slow things down. But we're going to move on to talk about the first book that we collaborated on. And I will introduce that by saying that I recommended you to Caribbean Reads. Now, don't feel no way, but I normally recommend Antiguan writers because that's my I want to push our local brand of, our aesthetic and so on. So you were like perhaps the only non-Antiguan artist that I recommended. And I recommended you because I used to follow your blog. You don't blog as much as you used to, but I used to follow your blog and I used to really like how you spoke about art. And I used to love seeing the images that you would put up. And I felt that your aesthetic very much suited the almost ethereal quality of the underworld that I was trying to capture, the softness of your lines, the vividness of your colors, the almost fairy tale aesthetic of it sometimes, but also very grounded in reality. So I thought, and also the way your art moves. Your art feels like it's moving. You had a mermaid piece that I was like, she can draw the sea. She can draw what things look like under the sea. And so I recommended you. And I was from the time I started seeing the images being pushed out, I was very happy. At first, I started seeing the character profiles that you drew, and I was very happy. And I had very little pushback. But perhaps you can talk a little bit about the process, and I will try to pull up the images while you do so.
For Lost, I felt like it just flowed. It was one of the first major illustration projects I had worked on, and I was so happy it was with you. But it felt, at the risk of sounding really cliche, it felt like everything just flowed perfectly. It came together. I enjoyed very much because I work primarily in watercolor, and I use, as you were saying, a lot of undulating lines and kind of very um, ethereal flow in my watercolor. So it was very much a pleasure. It felt like it happened very organically. In the first stages, we sorted out the characters, particularly Dolphin, just to get it right with his dreamy eyes and his nose, and it was just fun. It was fun, and as an illustrator, that's just about the best thing you could hope for is a project just feeling, like something you want to do. And I very much enjoyed the color of Dolphins on the Sea World, the colors of Dolphins on the Sea World, and kind of bringing that to life. And what's really special about that project too is that it's something that children respond to so excitedly because I actually take the physical illustrations to workshops and things like that, and it always feels like just a really fun project. The screen share is giving a little trouble. Yeah.
Sorry, I was muted. I was saying, yeah, it's giving me a bit of trouble, and I'm not the most techie person, but I wanted to point out that this is Dolphin here, and that's Coral. Coral was actually the first character I saw. And I just fell in love with him. You captured his playfulness and his spirit just shone through. Coral is a jellyfish in the book.
Yeah, and I think you were talking a little bit earlier about the visual of the jellyfish moving, kind of having that visual in mind. And I mean, I actually did not, I went on the words for that one. I actually did not look for photo reference, but I went on your words in the book and just how they kind of resonated in my mind. And I think I was really happy with that kind of visual of the jellyfish swirling in a mass. It was a really fun and it felt very much like a good fit with the watercolor medium and the kind of very magical ethereal flow.
Okay, I think I have keep going for a minute. I think I have Coral. I'm trying to this was the first, if I can find it. This was the first character study that I saw for Coral, the jellyfish, one of my faves.
Yes, we did maybe 2 or 3 versions. Ah, there he is. Yes.
But isn't he just sweet? I just love him.
He is so cute. I think there was a version of Coral before this, I believe.
Yes.
But this one was so much cuter.
Yes.
So much cuter.
Very cute. Just like I mean, in time I want like plush toys of Coral and Dolphin and t-shirts of them. I just love the artwork. I love the artwork, and you envisioned it better than I could have written it, even though you say you got it from the words. Were there any challenges for you with capturing them, or capturing the world of the sea? Because I know the challenge for me was once we got to the editing phase and the reading specialist and so on was involved, and I had to kind of, because I didn't set out to write a children's book, I just set out to write a story. And then I had to think through how to adapt that story for the children's market. That means adapting the vocabulary, adapting things like, how they think, how they learn, making sure the level of the reading is appropriate to the age. And the reading specialist was assigned by the publisher to assist with that in the previous incarnation of the book, because this book previously existed as Fish Out of Water with another publisher. It's Lost, the Caribbean Sea Adventure with Caribbean Reads. And I remember one of the things is capturing how the world of the underwater moves. And I remember that what eventually broke through for me was one day I was sitting out on a field and I saw the grass moving, just swaying in the breeze. And that helped me to get the sense of a world in constant motion. And so once I got over that hump and adjusted the language and adjusted the um, the sentences and how the story evolves, and even the ending, because you kind of have to bring it to more of a closure than perhaps you would do with an adult story if you were telling it and wanted to. We have to give children a sense of closure, and they all lived happily ever after. It's all going to work out. So, yeah, those were the challenges for me. What were the challenges for you with loss?
For me, there were two challenges. The first one was how do I show emotions on the face of a seal or a jellyfish or these undersea creatures? How do I sort of convey surprise, for example, like when dolphin wakes up and he's in a whole new sea and he's startled and he's shocked, and so it was interesting for me to kind of do the subtle tweaks on their faces. Because of course how you manipulate the facial features on an animal is so different than how you would do it on a person. So it was a learning curve for me too, to just kind of play around with that. And the other one was making sure that the undersea world was not monotonous, that each page was not kind of the same blue, the same flat blue. So it took a lot of kind of soft blending, lots of water, lots of movement, having the light filter through in different ways, like in this one, the kind of the background with the dolphins jumping and just the kind of soft introduction of yellow. Because when you think on the sea, like right off the bat from your own visual imagination, there's a whole lot of blue. But then when Coral finds himself in the Caribbean Sea, of course, we wanted that light and the coral reefs and just, sunshine filtering through it to be full of life. So the challenge for me was making sure that every page was not just flat blue, just flat ocean. So it was interesting, and it also involved like a lot of physical watercolor play. So I learned a lot. I actually learned a lot as well in consistency in keeping the characters varied but consistent and recognizable, because like I said, it was my first major illustration project. And so Coral and Dolphin were always special to me.
And can I say which image was most special to me from this entire project? It was this one.
Oh.
I love this image, and I'm glad that I finally get the opportunity to share it. This is you and your firstborn with loss, and it's a heartwarming image for me. How do you feel when you look at that?
Oh my goodness. And so it's funny because Lost kind of I associate with him when he was little, and The Jungle Outside I associate with my Dante. But he always is so proud of mommy and this book. The other books not so much. The other books I've done afterwards, but this this one he's very attached to, and he likes to tell people that mommy drew the pictures in this book. So
I love it.
as well.
I love it.
And also, in my experience, because I've presented Lost at a few like children's workshops at Bocas and at some festivals here, children always have the loveliest response to the characters in Lost. They're always so involved and so excited and so like, what happens next? How did he end up in the sea? So I love. I mean, maybe I taken a little bit of credit for Lost too, but
That's okay.
I love presenting Lost to at children's workshops and that kind of thing. It's always so much fun.
Okay, so before we move on to The Jungle Outside, I'll just say that Lost the Caribbean Sea Adventure is also available. There's a Spanish language edition, Perdida, Una Aventura en el Mar Caribe, and any Spanish listeners can slap my wrist if I said that wrong. But it is inspired by a true story. There was an Arctic seal that got stranded in the Caribbean Sea, and the idea was, how does this Arctic seal then find its way home. And so one of the things I remember I sent was the reference image for what was the character Wadadli, the Arctic seal. And I'm just trying to pull up Wadadli so people can see him or her. I actually don't know if Wadadli is male or female, but I found, I don't know if you find this, but I've found that with anthropomorphic characters like this, the child kind of projects their gender onto the character. But I believe both of these characters were male. But anyway, so this is the original with Wadadli. Pulling him up. Oh, it's very small. It's too small. Let me see if I can get it big. That's as big as it gets. But one of the things I thought you captured was the eyes, the soulfulness of the eyes. And so that's my last question on the Lost, the Caribbean Sea Adventure, unless you have anything else to add, was how did you capture those eyes?
I remember going through a lot of rough, I don't know, I don't have the image, but I remember going through a lot of rough sketches of him to begin with, because to get started, I really want to feel of the character of Dolphin. And it was challenging, like I was saying, to kind of transition into drawing a seal. A seal is not an animal that I would have thought of to draw, but I wanted him to not just be a seal, any seal, to use any seal as reference, but to kind of capture that kind of, because from that picture of what Adley, he does look very kind of lost and sad and cute, and I wanted to kind of capture that. So there was a lot of sketching, there was a lot of sketch work and tweaking little details, especially the eyes. And the eyes lent themselves really well to the kind of eyes that you see often in children's illustrations, these very big, dramatic, soulful eyes with light reflected in them. So he himself, and not other reference images so much, was the biggest inspiration for the figure of Dolphin in the book. I love this one because of how happy and daydreamy he is over there. And this is one of the pages I use often when I have illustration workshops to show how you kind of translate the text into visuals. Because in this one, I think the text talks about how Dolphin is so daydreamy and he kind of gets away from his friends and goes doing his own thing. And then the drawings of seals and the flow and the movement. So that I remember this page being is one that I had to redo a few times because there are 4 seals and I had never drawn or thought of drawing seals before this. So it took some practice.
Well, that's a beautiful thing about the creative arts, isn't it? Is that, I mean, if you're doing the same thing that you've always done, then you're not really creating. You're for me, as challenging as these new endeavors are, because I always like to experiment, is you're always trying to discover the boundaries, not only of your talent, but of the ideas that are in your mind, of your potential, of your ability to imagine the world. And I find that as an artist, it's so obvious that artists are doing this constantly. As a writer, I mean, you don't get to see the side work as much, but I feel that we do that as well. And if you would agree, as a writer, it's always about trying to challenge yourself and push your boundaries technically, but also, I don't know, express the things that, for me, the things that I'm trying to understand or the things that I'm trying to explore.
Yeah, particularly, I've actually been thinking this a lot lately, that had it not been for specific illustration projects, I would be probably very happy to stay in one comfort zone all the time. So it takes effort, of course, but it's good, it's healthy, and it pushes me to grow and to try new things and to afterwards be like, wow, it worked and I learned something. And it's very much like that with writing as well, although maybe not so visibly, maybe not so obviously as it would be in illustration. But this was definitely one of those projects. As I think the jungle outside even more so in terms of the physical world of it.
Definitely. I was actually trying to pull it up. But let's talk a little bit about the jungle outside. this was a project with HarperCollins. I believe they had reached out for stories from the Caribbean for their Big Cat series, Collins Big Cat series, which is an international series of children's books, and they didn't have like a line of own voices, by which I mean voices written and illustrated by people from the Caribbean. They didn't have a lot of books in that line, and so they decided to do a push in that direction. And they'd actually asked me for some suggestions, and of course, Danielle Boodoo-Fortune ended up on the list. But they had also seen the work you had done on Lost, which is why I think they paired us together again. I think they liked that combo. And I like it too. I think it worked out well both times. How do you feel about the project and how it turned out?
This project, it felt a little more intense. The edits and the rewrites were the redos, the little tweaks here and there were a lot more. And it felt, it in terms of the world, is a very much more familiar world than Lost, but at the same time, it pushed me a little more out of my comfort zone because there was a lot that I had to get just right. Each tree was important. Each, shrub and fruit and everything was important. And so the attention to detail that I had to have was important. But in the process, I got very attached to the characters. Like I felt myself, wanting to do justice to them, especially because Dante was Dante. But
Is there a particular image? Is there a particular image you want to talk about in terms of the challenges? I could pull it up.
Let's see. Well, first of all, there's the tree. There was the tree, the date palm. We have that one?
Yes, we do. Yes. Keep going. So,
the date palm at first, I kind of pulled up a few reference photos. I think
I had sent some reference photos as well. It's right. Funny, you wouldn't think either of us would need reference photos for palm trees, but there we were. Because one of the things with the story is that that palm tree is a plot point in that it has. I remember one of my notes was the first one that you sent was so pretty, but it wasn't wild and rough enough, and it had to be the palm tree from Dante's point of view, the little boy who's scared of the jungle outside, and it has to be all rough and wild and so on. And the palm tree has a rough bark, and so I was like, no, it needs to be less pretty almost. This is very pretty, but in a different way, in a more rough way.
And this particular illustration, because I think I did this one maybe 3 times, I think. I redid this one 3 times, and I had never really thought, just like with Lost, of the kind of intricacies of drawing a palm tree, but it made me think about how we kind of smooth over a lot of things and, visually in not just children's books, but in general, we kind of leave out the rough bits and the wild bits and especially of the landscape we're surrounded by. And that was a really important part of illustrating the book for me, kind of embracing that wildness. This tree is really smooth and almost not real looking by comparison.
Even the palms are almost like uniformed and almost too perfect.
It's like postcard idyllic, and that's not, in hindsight, that's not what, the book needed at all. And it made me think a lot about that, like how to resisting the temptation to make everything postcard idyllic in art and illustrations, and I suppose in writing too. But the palm tree was interesting, and because I think that was the first illustration we did, it was, the first one always takes a little more tweaking to get it just right. So
but I can attest that we got it just right. Love this. This is final from the book. The rough bark, the wild fronds, and you'll have to find out why you'll have to read the book if you're listening to find out why there's a person falling from the tree. But yeah, I love how it turned out in the end. I know for me, speaking on that point in terms of what felt not quite right in the beginning, was the character studies initially. Do you remember notes on those?
Yes.
And how did you receive those notes? Were you pissed?
No, it was actually exciting because, I wanted to get the characters just right. And I remember the notes on Tanti. When I got your notes, like, make her a little bit more of a cool grammar. I was
Well,
so
two
excited.
things. Two things. I wanted her to be blacker. I
Right,
wanted
yes,
to be
yes,
on the dark skin side of the
yes,
spectrum. And I wanted to have natural, I wanted to seem less like a grandma, if that's
yes.
possible. But
No, but
also just be kind of, have a natural, because part of it for me, the sidebar is in the world of children's picture books, we don't see enough people at the dark end of the spectrum and especially as people, as characters that children can feel affection for and love and recognize themselves in, so that becomes almost a mirror that beams it back into themselves, that they're beautiful, that they're loved, that they're. So I wanted a grandmother who they could see as their grandmother. And by they, I mean, obviously, I hope all children of all colors read this book, but
Mhm.
look at me. I want the grandmother to be someone who could be my grandmother.
Yeah.
So that was kind of important to me. And I love how it turned out. Keep talking about it. I'm going to pull up both sets of images so people can see the difference.
It's interesting because when I first drew Tanti, I can't even remember what the first version was, but the notes were exciting because I remember thinking it makes me think just like the palm tree of what we automatically kind of go to as an illustration, and it was not that at all. It was different. It was something. Yeah, here she was. Yeah, it was
She's
something.
very lovely. She's
Yes,
very lovely. But I can't picture her climbing a tree and doing those
that's
things.
right.
Maybe she would. Maybe she would. I don't know. I'm not judging her, but I want I want somebody.
No,
Um,
but
yeah.
Tanti is so much more of a person. She's lovely, and I had fun doing it. And she was a character that I kind of got attached to. Like I enjoy doing the little details about her cool hair with the hints of purple,
I remember
and
that note. I said I want
accessories,
hints of purple in her hair.
and her accessories, and her smile, her beautiful smile. So I actually was really grateful for your notes on Tanti because I think she's a really memorable, gorgeous character. And yes, I can see, I mean, she's that grandma that everybody would want to have, that all
But
children would want to have.
what's interesting to me here as well is that Dante really didn't change much. Either of them could be his grandmother. It's just
Yeah,
which grandmother he's hanging out with on this occasion.
the one who's climbing the trees.
Speaking of, that's another element that was kind of important. Well, I didn't realize how important it was to me until I actually saw the image. And I just remember being a girl, climbing trees, and one of the folk things that used to be said is, girls shouldn't climb trees because they might blight the tree. I don't
Yes,
know if you have that in Trinidad,
they'll sour
but
the fruit.
yeah.
Yeah, we have.
And all of that is a whole mess. It really is. It's a whole mess. So there's a part of me that's bringing that sort of gendered reading into the story that I didn't fully realize was there until I saw the artwork. That it moved me to see that. I'll try to pull it up as I'm talking, but it moved me to see that girl up a tree as the most natural thing in the world. Tell me about your relation to that image while I try to find it.
This might actually be maybe my favorite image in the whole book. There are a few of them kind of competing, but that one, I think that one was really special because, uh, to begin with, it was interesting to envision Tanti as a girl, to kind of picture what she would have been like as a girl. And I just kind of, just a side note, I kind of fell in love with the character of Tanti because I wish she was my grandmother. I love my
Yeah,
grandmother, but I wish she
yeah,
was my
same, same.
grandmother. And
Another favorite image is Tanti playing hand tennis with Dante in the street. I love
yes,
that. But this
and
is
so
Tanti as a girl up a tree.
as a girl climbing the mango tree, she's just so cool. And I that came to mind as well when I was doing it. That ridiculous saying that girls should not climb trees, and I, deliberately put like a million mangoes in the tree. The tree is abundant and gorgeous, and she is so comfortable in that tree, and
Full
she's adorable.
disclosure, full disclosure, when they said girls shouldn't climb trees, I didn't listen, but they did say it.
Yeah, I still do when I can. Not as admittedly not as well as I used to, but yes, I love
Hey,
this illustration. I
yeah.
think she is very much in her element, and I think it gives us, well, for me at least, it gave me a fuller sense of Tanti as a character and her kind of relationship with the garden and what she is passing on to Dante as well. So I loved this one very much.
Okay, so we'll talk about one other thing before we pull up the chat. If you have questions for either Danielle or myself, please put your questions in the chat. And if I know what I'm doing, hopefully I'll be able to answer them. Um, but one of the things that's actually kind of funny when you think of it is you're from Trinidad, which is in the Southern Caribbean. I'm from Antigua and Barbuda, which is in the Eastern Caribbean. And there's so many subtle differences. People think of the Caribbean, especially people from outside, think of the Caribbean as one thing. And those differences come out in a collaboration like this. Because I remember initially, for instance, one of the things, which I don't know how if you thought it was a weird note, but I was like, the sand isn't right. The sand, the sand needs to be paler. And I didn't think I would be that involved. I'm like, am I going to come across nitpicky here? Because it's not nitpicky at that point. I kind of like to, I see that illustration as being the person, do your thing. But they kept coming to me, what do you think? What do you think? And I was like, well, the sand isn't right. And, because Antiguans, we're proud of our beaches. We think that we have the best beaches in the whole world, 365, one beach day of the year and all that. And but our sand in Barbuda is known for its pink sand. Antigua is known for its white sand, and the sand color and the sand texture felt a little off to me. In the end, it felt perfect, but initially, how did you receive that note? And was there any other subtle landscape difference that jumped out at you?
The sun thing, I didn't think about it. It's interesting how you just kind of draw upon your own experience without thinking about it at all. So I automatically went, because the sand in Trinidad is darker. It's browner, it's golden brown or sometimes even darker than that. So, I just, mental picture beach and
Yeah, yeah.
but it was interesting and it was cool because it led me down a kind of research tunnel. So I had to go, find reference pictures of beaches and all that. But it was interesting. And another thing is some of the names of trees and fruits. I can't remember them offhand, but there was one in particular that I had to go Google.
You remember which one it was? But that is something I found fascinating. When I went to UWI's, when I realized how we're all kind of meeting from all parts of the Caribbean, and we're saying golden apple, and the person is like, "Are you talking about a star apple, or you talk?" It's like Kinnip is a good example. Kinnip is Chenet one place. I mean, just different things have different names in the Caribbean, and so it's all. I mean, part of the joy of this is the discovery of those differences and the celebration of those differences. The Kiskadee. Can you talk about the Kiskadee?
So I love that illustration too because I just think it's so cute and relatable. I mean, just like you were saying, there is so much that is the same and there's so much that is different and there's so much that is the same but by a different name and there are so many subtle differences, but I think it's just so rich and interesting and textured. Um, right now, to the side of me is a massive mango tree that's dropping on the ground, like right outside. And so that image with the mango felt so natural and fun and relatable to me. And so, I look outside and I'm like, Kiskadee, because there's a Kiskadee. Without even thinking, I wonder if Kiskadees are endemic. So
But somebody asked me, is Illustrator from Guyana? Because I don't think that bird is endemic to Antigua. Thankfully, I mean, the story exists in the world of the imagination, in this wonderful Caribbean island where you can have Kiskadees alongside mongoose, alongside lizards, alongside whatever you need it to be. Because part of the beauty, especially of children's books, is you can go crazy with the fantasy element of it. So who cares if the Kiskadee is not endemic to Antigua? It is now.
Such a cute page though, that lizard munching on that mango. I enjoyed this one so much.
I remember I had to get in the note, the sort of section about different, how everybody loves the mango. I know I love mango. But I remember the day I saw a dog leaving my yard with a mango in its mouth. I was like, dogs? Okay. That's new information. So that's why I kind of ended up putting all of that into the book.
But it's so lovely and relatable. The mango
Definitely.
tree, yeah.
All right. So we're going to flip over. Oh, we have a comment in the chat about the Tanti in a tree, which is
Oh.
everybody's favorite image. The person says Tanti in a tree is one of my favorite images too. So we agree. Both the writer and the artist agree that this is one of those images that, and frankly, I mean, you hope your books travel far, especially children's books, which can travel far, that, you know, little girls see that it's okay. You're not gonna blight the tree, and little boys learn to get over their fears, and cool grandmas get to play hand tennis in the street with their kids. I mean, as long as their knees hold up and all that. But this is a gardening grandma. She's pretty sturdy. So I love her, and I want to thank you, Danielle, for being able to so vividly and accurately um, recognize and illustrate the world of the story without. One of the things I find fascinating about illustrations is that even though the story comes from my imagination, there's a way that you make it your own as well, without um, I don't know how you walk that line. How you walk that line in terms of, yes, this is this person's realization of this person's vision, but also it's me as the artist and my thing. How did you walk that line?
I think it takes a while, which is why the first few images are usually the hardest. It takes a little bit kind of tweaking and figuring out to kind of get into the that particular spirit of it. And I think it also it takes a lot of reading and kind of sitting with it, because I'm a big believer in just kind of sitting with the work for a while and feeling out the energy of it, and
Hmm.
kind of trying to not have attachment to it, but not bring too much of myself, my personal idea about it into it. But it's a kind of channeling. It's a kind of channeling of what I see the vision to be, how I understand the vision to be, from the text,
Hmm.
the being flexible and willing to change and willing to just accept the change and try to understand it and not resist it too much and just kind of flow with it.
Yeah. Now
Yeah,
remember, if you're tuned into the chat, please put your questions. Your questions don't actually have to be limited to Lost, the Caribbean Sea Adventure, and The Jungle Outside. You have Bocas Prize-winning poet Danielle Boodoo-Fortune here in the chat. Ask her something. Oh, they're saying your audio has gone noisy, Danielle. I'm
is it
not sure.
better?
This, I'm not hearing it. It's fine. It's fine to me, but they're saying it's gone noisy on the listeners' end.
Hopefully
So
it's better now. There was a little blip for a second there, but hopefully it's better now.
let's hope.
Yeah.
Okay, because Daniel and I are very technical. We're artists. So if there's something to be done to fix the sound, so let us know if it's any better, and please ask your questions. In the meantime, we'll keep talking. But if you don't want to hear us just loving on each other, you got to ask us your questions and talk to us. So, okay, they're saying it's better now. Cool,
Yeah.
excellent, excellent. Are you working on anything right now, Danielle?
I'm working on about 100 different things. I'm a mess. But I think, I don't know, to me it feels like a season for just kind of quietly working beneath the surface. I'm working on a coloring book. I'm writing very scrappily in bits and pieces. I'm painting, but honestly, if I'm being honest with myself, the work of the moment is just taking care of my two little ones and staying balanced, doing what flows and what comes, but I'm not no rush.
Let me ask
Um,
you about that. How do you? Because I know for me, I worked from home for many years, and I don't have any little ones. I mean, I have nieces and nephews, and I know how disruptive their presence can be. I mean, I love them, but it's not always conducive to the creative process. How is it for you as a mom with two young kids at home?
I would be lying if I said anything other than it's complete chaos. It is complete chaos. It is so hard. So they're almost 2 and 4, and it's if I wasn't like committed fully, like with all my heart committed to being an artist and a writer, I would have probably abandoned it for a long time now. If it wasn't who I am, like an essential part of myself, I would not
Yeah,
have been able to do it. Yeah, because to find the time is impossible, almost impossible. And to find the energy and the physical space, especially now as, we're all home all the time, you
yeah.
know.
I
So
walk
it's,
a lot. I walk.
I've taken up gardening.
It's good. It's good for the mind. It's good for the mind. But
Yes.
I 100% agree with what you're saying. It's funny how the world has kind of imploded on us in a way. Everybody is inside. I mean, everybody has been inside for the past year, and so it means even though you're socializing perhaps a lot less, you're crowded a bit more than you would be normally. In terms of, you mentioned the physical space, but also the mental space. Because one of the challenges sometimes is the people around you may or may not understand. It's not just I have 10 minutes, but do I have 10 minutes up here to breathe and all of
Can I
that.
just
So,
can I just switch it on automatically
yeah,
and will it flow immediately? No, it won't.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yes, it's more than just physical space.
definitely. We have some questions. Um, what are some other collaborations you see happening that you like? Um, Daniel. Do you have a question at the top of your mind? Because this is catching me a bit off guard. But I don't know. I just like anything where you see disciplines sort of intersecting. I know the last thing I saw in my inbox was, and I'm looking forward to watching it, is Motion, who is a Canadian poet of Antiguan descent. She had a film debut at TIFF this past, I guess, earlier this year that I'm curious to see how her poetic sensibility connects with the world of film and the visual arts. And of course, I have to big up Shabir Kirshner, who is an Antiguan cinematographer who is sweeping up a ton of awards right now for his work on the Small Acts series by Steve McQueen. Um, I also want to send everyone to the hashtag art challenge. I think I'm getting that right. If there's anybody in any artists in Antigua here, correct me on that. But there's a lot of artists in Antigua right now. I think around the world putting up images of some of their favorite images, and so I'm looking forward to my next creative space column writing about some of that. So I don't know if those count as collaborations, but responding to the art and intersecting with the art is part of it. So that's how I'm interpreting it. What about you, Danielle?
I mean, this definitely requires some more thought, but right away I think about the Bahamian artist Sonia Farmer and what she has been
Mm,
doing with handmade books and kind of working with poets and turning their words into these really tactile, interesting handmade books that open in different ways, and so you experience the poetry in and the actual physical book. It makes you think of books so differently. So that definitely stands out in my mind. Um,
I remember she had done one with the one I saw was she did one with Shivani Ramlachan.
yes,
Everyone knows I'm a haunt. Am I saying the title right?
everyone knows I'm a haunting. Yes, beautiful. Yeah, there are others. There are other poets that she's worked with, but I can't remember them offhand. She did a small one for me actually, from a poem from those songs. I really should post it because it's gorgeous, but it felt really personal, and I felt like I had to hold on to it for a while. There were actually shapes cut into the book, and it unfolded in such different ways. And bookmaking and bookbinding in itself is an art, and it's not something I
Yes.
thought about before. So I think what she's doing, and she does so many other fascinating things. So that came to mind, and there are a million other things I'm sure that I will remember afterwards.
After, yes, after, definitely. There's another question. What advice do either of you have for someone starting out either writing and hoping to be published or in illustration and wanting their work to reach more people? Okay, so this is actually how we were going to end the live. So this person preempted us. Do we go for it now?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have any other questions that you want to get in, do it quick because this is going to be our last wrap up sort of portion. We're going to talk about um, what advice, in my case, such as it is, that we have for people trying to do this thing that we do. Um, how do you become an illustrator, Danielle?
I mean, I would not be being honest if for me I didn't say it was a lot of luck. But I think for me it has involved a
Luck,
lot of
interjecting, luck being where preparation meets opportunity, by the way.
Of course, yes, yes, definitely. Because I had been, really churning out art, like personally, for some time before that, putting out a lot of art and trying to not just quantity, but trying to keep growing and kind of being flexible and trying different things. And so it didn't just kind of come out of the blue. I mean, and then of course, Lost being my first big project, major project. So there's some intersections there, of course. But in terms of starting out as an illustrator, especially if you're starting out from a background of being an artist, creating your own work before, I would I would have to say that it takes a lot of willingness to be flexible and to kind of not abandon, but not reside too firmly all the time in your own ideas, and to understand and be open to other points of view. I mean, I don't have a lot of advice in terms of how to access illustration jobs and that kind of thing. I would think it probably takes some aggression and actually, going for it. But for me, really getting into illustration has been a lot about being flexible, being open, and understanding, and kind of allowing the art to flow. I know that was
And
very big.
no, no, it's not. It's not at all. It's actually helping me to figure out because I actually asked you to go first so I could figure out what the hell I'm going to say. But you actually kind of pointed me in the direction because it is a bit of luck, even though we work really hard. I would say for writing, it's a lot of being open and being observant, and because for me, the world is my inspiration and the world around me specifically. I look at a story like The Jungle Outside, which is a very simple tale of connection between a boy and his grandmother and overcoming certain fears. And the inspiration for that was my mother and one of her grandchildren. Just being open and seeing the connection between them and how he was always following her around and so on. And at a certain point, something kicked in my brain and I just started writing them together. And as I said, Lost came from an actual story, an actual event that happened. So being open. And as a journalist, I also find myself inspired by stories in the news and, just things that are happening around me. So practice, 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 and always stay writing. Which is not to say putting that pressure on yourself to be competing with others, to be as prolific or to be as whatever, but to stay connected with the word, with the world of creativity, with the world of the imagination, I think is important. Everything doesn't have to end up out in the world. Sometimes, most of the times, hopefully, you're writing first and foremost for yourself. But what Daniel said about luck resonated with me because when I wrote, I'm not a children's book writer. I had to learn. My first book, The Boy from Willow Bend, kind of pigeonholed me because it is the story of a coming of age of a young boy. But in terms of writing children's, I had to learn that. And I wouldn't have learned it if I hadn't been um, open. I'm always scouting for opportunities, and I saw a call for submissions for children's books. And I was like, do I have any children's books? No, I don't. I have a story that is about something that could be a children's book. And so being open, being prepared, being open, I was able to seize the opportunity and submit it. Similarly, with The Jungle Outside, I wasn't looking to publish another children's book, but they were looking for voices from the Caribbean, and they reached out to me specifically, which is a blessing, and often not the way it works for me, because I have to submit a lot, which is another thing you have to do as a writer and an artist, is submit a lot, and that means you get rejected a lot, and sometimes it's going to hurt, but you got to keep going. And so that's what I do every day. I get up and I keep going, and that's my best advice, is get up and keep going, because you never know when someone else will see the work and say, hey, can you do this? And that's what happened with The Jungle Outside. I think for both me and Danielle, because I think they saw our work in Lost and were like, these two work well together. Their writing reflects their art reflects their writing. Let's see what happens with, and I mean, they haven't said this to me, but both of us were open to the opportunity, and another collaboration happened. And I actually hope that we collaborate again in the future. I mean, I don't have the resources to pin you down as my illustrator for life, but I love your work, and I hope we get to work together again. And I hope that answer helped the questioner a little bit. If there are no more questions, do you have any final thoughts, Danielle?
Just that it has not felt like chance that we have gotten to work together twice. The outcome has been beautiful, and I hope we get to work together again too. And this was fun.
It was. And you can have more fun with us on our social media. Danielle is always doing lives on Instagram. You want to pitch that a little bit so they can know where to check you out, Danielle?
It's been really just, in like spur of the moment kind of thing, but I do creative lives, process videos, just talking about art as kind of freeing up the hands and as therapy and that kind of thing. So if you're interested in art at all, or just creative and looking for ways to unblock yourself, that's something that I have been doing on Instagram as well. And of course, just to follow my work if you're interested.
Definitely. So I'm here on YouTube. I'm all over social media. I have my column. I blog a lot, and hopefully I'll be finishing my novel and my short story collection soon. I actually have another children's picture book that is making the rounds, so we'll see. Maybe something else will come out soon as well. But for now, I'm just trying to stay grounded and sane and centered, and to create when I can. And I'm very happy to have had the opportunity to chat with Danielle, and thankful to all of you who joined us here today. I'm grateful, in spite of the challenges of the past year, that we get to be creative and to put beauty out into the world. Thanks, Danielle, for joining me.
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, everyone.